Hi, welcome back to Libraries and Lions and Liars. So, last week I left off in the middle of a chapter because it was getting kind of long and I wanted to give us a little break. But um, our buddy Frederick is meeting all the different kids in the camp, and he met Nosebleed, as you recall, um, Ant Bite, and Specs. And Specs was the one that broke the glasses. And we left off with, well, do I look really blurry to you? Nosebleed pressed. Well, my friend Raj wears glasses, Frederick said. He couldn't play baseball without them. He plays third base. He was on the all-star team last year. So this is a continuation of chapter 6. And we learn in this chapter how Frederick is going to spin his tale, his lie, and how he's going to get accepted into this Camp Omagashi. So let's find out what happens. And if I met your buddy Raj, I'd break his glasses too, Specs said, jutting out his chin. Frederick thought that Specs had completely missed the point about how Raj's glasses were a good thing. Nosebleed's mouth was full again as he pointed to the other two boys at the table. We call him the professor, he said, indicating the older boy with the chin dimple. The professor glanced up from his book and nodded at Frederick. And that's Antbite. Nosebleed gestured at the smaller boy beside Frederick, who was glaring at the empty table where his breakfast had been before it was bled on and slung to the ground. Frederick guessed the professor was the professor because he liked to read, which was a lot more promising a nickname than Specs or Nosebleed. But he wasn't sure why someone would be called Antbite. Did the kid bite people? Did he bite ants? Had he once had like a million ant bites and had to go to the hospital? Antbite didn't seem eager to discuss it. So what's your nickname? Nosebleed asked. Uh, said Frederick, stalling for time. He'd never had a nickname. Raj and Joel didn't have nicknames either. These four boys had just met at the welcome meeting this morning, and they already all had nicknames, while Frederick, in his entire life, had never done anything to earn a nickname. Well, he said, thinking fast. Some people call me. He paused, and then he said the first name he thought of, Frederick Fredrickson. The professor looked up from his book, letting the cover fold closed. Antbite's permanent glare faltered and was replaced with a doubtful expression. Nosebleed and Specs blinked at each other, and then they burst into laughter. That's the dumbest nickname I ever heard of, the professor said, awed over the sound of their guffaws. For some reason, that made the other two laugh even harder. Yeah, how'd you even come up with a nickname that dumb? Specs asked as he gasped for air. Frederick Fredrickson. Specs shook his head and slapped Frederick's back so hard that Frederick jerked forward, his face nearly hitting his breakfast. Frederick smiled weakly and shrugged. You're the funniest guy I ever met, Nosebleed was wiping his eyes. Frederick looked around. He realized he was waiting for someone to disagree and say he wasn't that funny. But no one did. All the others were smiling too. Even Antbite smiled a little, though he was still holding his knife in his fist. No one had even no one had ever told Frederick he was funny, and even though the thing they were all laughing at was his own name, he found that it felt good to make people laugh. It made him feel happy, popular, powerful. He picked up his fork and started digging into his food. The breakfast potatoes were peppery and crispy on the outside. I wondered where you were when I saw your name on the registration, Speck said. My brothers told me about you. He goes to the Straker Academy. You got sent there too, right? Before you were kicked out? Anyway, you weren't on the bus, so how'd you get here? Frederick paused with his fork halfway into his mouth, brain reeling, wondering what the Straker Academy was and what Speck's brother had said about Dashiell. If anyone at camp knew Dashiell, the real Dashiell, then they would know that Frederick wasn't him. Yeah, said Nosebleed. How'd you get here? Frederick stammered. His mind was a blank, empty hole of nothingness, and more nothingness. I stole a boat and came down on the river. Everyone at the table went still and looked at Frederick, and Frederick gulped down the pancake he was eating, realizing that he'd just said what he had just said and how it sounded. Dangerous. Illegal. Did you really steal a boat? Aunt Vi was looking at Frederick in the eye. Frederick said. Were they going to tell on him? He needed to explain that he'd been joking, or at least that it wasn't the way it sounded. Well, oh, that's classic Dash, Speck said, shaking his head in appreciation. Nosebleed was gazing at Frederick, a forgotten sausage in his hand. The professor was smiling at himself, his eyes far away, like he was imagining what it must be like to commandeer a boat and navigate it down a dark river. Huh, Antbite said, tilting his head back. He set his knife down. Frederick shifted in his seat. He was pleased that the boys seemed to be so impressed with him, but he didn't know if he should let them think that he stole stuff all the time. You can't fight while you're here, though, Speck said. They're serious about that. Frederick made an annoyed sound. Why does everyone keep saying that? I'm not going to get into a fight. Is that what you said before your face got like that? The professor asked, pointing his book at Frederick. Oh, Frederick said, his hand going up to his broken nose. This wasn't a fight. That's right, Speck said, slapping the table and grinning. 'Twas but a light skirmish for our man Dash. You've got blood on your shirt, Nosebleed said. Cold water'll get that out. Frederick looked down at his t-shirt he had been wearing since yesterday. It was spattered with dark specks. He got you good, the professor observed, eyeing Frederick's nose. Hey, Speck said, don't be disrespectful. I bet Dash got the other guy good, too. What did the other guy look like when you were done with him? Nosebleed said eagerly, leaning forward, gazing at Frederick as he took a bite of sausage. Well, Frederick said, considering. He's about my height. He has reddish hair. Aunt Pike groaned and covered his eyes with his hands. Nosebleed laughed so hard that chewed sausage spewed out of his mouth and onto the table. So, Speck said, leaning in toward Frederick, squeezing his fork in his fist. Is it true what they say about you? He asked in a low voice. Nosebleed, the professor, and Antbite went still, and Frederick knew they were hanging on every word. Is what true? Frederick asked. What you did with the iguana and the Cabbage Patch Kid? Specs said eagerly. Is it true? Frederick looked around at the other boys and shifted in his seat. It probably wasn't right, taking credit for something he hadn't done. But then he saw Specs lick his lips, and Antbite was listening. The professor had forgotten his book, and Nosebleed was ignoring his food. Frederick remembered that powerful feeling he'd had when he'd made them laugh, and now he wanted to see their faces light up again and know that he was the one responsible for that excitement. It's the whole truth, he said in a low voice, and nothing but the truth. He swallowed and crossed his fingers beneath the table. So help me God. There was a moment of silence at the table, everyone holding their breath. Then one word escaped Nosebleed, like a sigh. Wow. So, I will start chapter 7 in the next video. Stay tuned. I'm wondering about this iguana and Cabbage Patch doll. I don't know what to expect, but we'll find out. Thanks for reading with me, everyone.